which today means something a little bit different than probably they intended at the time. So he seeks out Jesus, and then the conversation goes according to the Gospel of John. In reply, Jesus declared, "I tell you the truth. No one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again." This is where we get the whole religious connotation nowadays of being born again, right? But it's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what they were saying. How can great question by Nicodemus, so everybody should ask this, right? But how can a man be born again when he is old? Nicodemus asked. Surely he cannot enter a second time into his mother's womb to be born, right? Have you seen the size of this? Right? It doesn't work. And Jesus answers, "I tell you the truth, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless he's born of the water and of the Spirit." Which is fascinating because, remember, the water, the water breaking, the whole concept of water, being born of the water, the physical birth, right? And we being mainly made of, our bodies being mainly made of water. Thanks for your patience. And then he continues, "Flesh gives birth to flesh, but the Spirit gives birth to the Spirit." You see, so your spirit doesn't come when the body starts. It's there before. Because flesh gives birth to flesh, but the Spirit comes from the Spirit. So it's not that your soul begins when you are born. It's been there before. "You should not be surprised at my saying, you must be born again." This is beautiful, I think, very poetic. "The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everybody born in the Spirit." We can see, you can hear me talking, I'm a spirit, but you can't see my spirit. You don't know where it came from yet. It's there. "How can this be?" Nicodemus asked, which is great, right? Nicodemus really wants to understand. He's really trying to get down to the base. I find him fascinating. What a fascinating man. Because he really wants to understand. And Jesus replies, "You are Israel's teacher," because remember, the Sanhedrin was the doctors of the law and supposed to know everything. "And you do not understand these things? I tell you the truth, we speak of what we know, and we testify to what we have seen, but still you people do not accept our testimony. I have spoken to you of earthly things, and you do not believe it. How then will you believe if I speak of heavenly things?" Right? If he's talking about charity in the physical world and being kind to each other, people are not accepting that and being difficult with that part and still trying to create different camps and fight, how will we understand these things like the wind that we cannot see? So let's get the basics figured out before we go into the more complicated parts. But I find it fascinating, right? That it goes on. Going back to Nicodemus here, kudos to Nicodemus, to the good old Nick, for going out and seeking it out, seeking that answer in there. But I think that what is great to see here is that these different instances that we talked about, there's 6 different cases, are examples of places in which you could make an argument that reincarnation is not only found in the New Testament under a different name, because again, the name reincarnation wasn't there, the word, but that there was a common belief at the time revolving around reincarnation, as we can see witnesses by the questions and so forth. But okay, so we've got all of this, but what I truly find fascinating is that all of this and the way that the New Testament came to be, the way that it was brought together, points to the fact that we cannot take things literally with those books, because they've been changed over time. They've been translated from different languages. They have been written 20 years after the fact, the earliest we have, and they have been harmonized and changed by the people who are transcribing those. So clearly we cannot take everything literally, because translations and changes and everything else is really hard. What we got to do is try to understand the meaning of it. And so the same goes with the word reincarnation. You're not going to, if you're looking for validation to reincarnation by looking and finding the word reincarnation there, you're not going to find it. You're going to have to deal with the fact that's not there. But the funny thing I think is beautiful here is every good code kind of has a clue inside the code on how to read the own code. And I find here in the second letter to Corinthians that Paul says, I think it's a beautiful sentence, "He has made us competent as ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life." If we focus on the little mini itty-bitty letters and try to take things personally, it would only create divisiveness. We only be divided among ourselves because we will interpret things so different because we come from different backgrounds, and we will be stuck on that and we won't accept anything else. But if we try to understand things in spirit, right, by the meaning of it, the overall meaning of the passage or the context of the times, chances are we will be happier in arriving in our own conclusions. Which I think is really, really interesting and really great because it's a 2,000 years old invitation for us to be reflective about the context and the way that things come about. For us not to look at the words, but to kind of think about the whole in general. And I find it very interesting that we also find in the third question of the Spirit's book, question number 3, when there's a question about is God infinite, what it is, the Spirit tells us, human speech is too impoverished and insufficient to define that which transcends human intelligence. What do I mean by that? There's a subtle reminder to that which Jesus was telling Nicodemus before. Like, I'm trying to tell you the basics here, and you don't even get that. So getting the really difficult things, it's way harder for you. So we can't just attain ourselves at words because our language is oftentimes insufficient to translate thought or what we mean. Don't we do that ourselves in our daily lives? Don't sometimes we say something thinking that people will understand a certain way and they understand it completely different? The words as the vehicle of thought are still very imprecise things. So we have to be very careful about measuring our words, how we say things and how to interpret things, which is also a great invitation in a way for us to be considerate of other people's words. When they say something that rubs us the wrong way, we say, hey, words are not always perfect. Maybe he meant something else. Maybe she meant something else. Let me ask him, what did you mean by this? Let's do a Nicodemus. Let's ask more questions. Say, what do you mean by this? I want to be sure, right? So the shortcomings of language are a really interesting piece that we got to be aware when we look back to the New Testament or whatever it is to really think about things, especially when it comes to reincarnation. I really wanted to kind of mention briefly the parable of the talents that we find in 2 different places. We find it in Matthew and we find it in Luke. Let's kind of go over briefly because we're running a little bit tight on time in general. But basically, the idea here, let's go at it. Let's go at it. I think we have a little bit of time, right? So would you guys be okay if I read the parable and then we talk a little bit about it? It's a little big, but okay. I think with reincarnation, it offers us a new perspective to it. For it will be like, this is in Matthew, right? For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted them his property. To one, he gave 5 talents, little coins at the time, talents, 5 talents to one. To another, 2, and to another, 1. So 5, 2, and 1. 3 people, right? To each according to his ability. Right? Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent and so also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Right? We all know the story. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and sat on accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Right? So you took care of 5, which was not that much. For him it was, I will give you more. Enter into joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He who also had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground, where you have what is yours. Here, have what's yours. But his master answered him, "You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reaped where I have not sown and gather where I scatter no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it. So he take the talent from him and give it to those who had the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be more, who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Hardcore stuff. Let's review this really quickly, right? 3 people and a boss, right? Boss comes and says, "Hey, I'm going to be away for a little bit. I want you to take care of what I have. You get 5 talents. Please take care of the 5 coins. You get 2 coins. Please take care of the 2 coins. You got 1 coin. Please take care of the 1 coin." Why 5? Why did he give that person 5 and that person 2 and that person 1? Well, because they have different abilities. So he trusted more to those who had more abilities to kind of do that, which in itself is kind of a beautiful thing, right? The more you have, the more you will be trusted with. What happened? Lord goes away. The master goes away. The guy that had 5 coins goes into the market, trades with people, right? An act of trading, interacting with people. He makes more. He makes 10. From 5 to 10, he doubles it. The one that has 2, likewise, goes out, does different things, comes back with 4. So he also doubles it, right? The one that had 1, what does he do? Interesting enough, he has a really funny idea of God. He thinks God is a very mean-spirited and very hard man. So he's afraid of God, right? And he buries his talent in the ground so nobody would take it away. The master comes back and says, "Okay, what have you done with my coins, with my talents?" The one that had 5 steps up first. Interesting that he steps up first, right? He's got more responsibility. He steps up to the place first and he says, "You given me 5, I'll give you 5 back. They are all yours, 10. Right? And the master says, "Great. Actually, you keep those 10. The other one comes with 2, steps up next and says, "You gave me 2. I made them into 4. Here they are, the 4. Right? Nobody asked for a commission, by the way. Interesting, huh? Right? No, it's like, right? You could have given the 5 and keep the 5. Nobody did that. It's very human, right? For us to do it. And great joy. And he receives the same treatment. Isn't that interesting? Of the one with 5. Because the one with 5 is like, "Hey, you had 5, you doubled it, you made 10, right? 10 is more than 4. I like 6 more than 4, right? So even the other one doubling it, which was a great job, he's still like a lot less than, right, what he was. But he treats them the same, which is a beautiful idea of how it goes. Third guy is a little scared. He comes with all kinds of excuses, right? "Oh, I knew you're really tough. I was afraid. I know that you're a hard man, that you're always looking for more. So I was afraid. I hid it. I hid a talent. Now here it is 1. And then the master says, "Well, you should have at least have invested and give it with interest," right? So take that away. Give it to the one that has 10. Now he's got 11, right? And you go into suffering, right? The dark place. So there's many beautiful moral lessons in there for us in general, right? We can see the importance of working and everything else, and so forth and so forth. And we can kind of spend a couple of hours talking about the psychological, how people are thinking and who they go about different things. But what I want to suggest here is an interesting aspect, which is, why did one get 5, one got 2, and one got 1? They had different abilities. They had to come from somewhere. Reincarnation kind of comes in there. But I also want to suggest something here, which is, which of those are we? What if I told you that one way to interpret it is that we are all of them? We begin as being the one with 1. As we come back and we develop more abilities, we become the one with 2. And as we come back again with 5, we begin to think differently. We begin by being very scared and fearful of God. So we hide our talents. We think God is like us, is going to punish us. And in fact, we end up punishing ourselves the way we think God's going to punish us. or we punish others the same way, right? You sinful person, you. Then after we learn a couple of times, we come back and we have 2 talents. Like we doubled, like we went from 1, we went to 2. But we doubled it to 4. Wouldn't it make sense then the next time we'll come with 4? Why is there one with 5? It's a prettier number. I don't know, but one suggestion is, as we learn and grow, kind of like an exponential life, we keep growing exponentially and learning more. God also trusts us with more as is to challenge us. You could handle 4 last time. Now you're going to try 5. I'm going to give you an extra one for you to excel and so forth. But that is only possible if we understand the progression of things. And the only way that we can understand the progression of things is by really embracing reincarnation. There is no other way to explain in a long-term approach why one started out with 5 on this parable and one started out with 1. Only if we look back into many lifetimes we would have seen that the one with 5 was really eventually, back in the day, 1 with 1. Right? So reincarnation, not that it changes the meaning of the parable, it just adds another layer to it for us to kind of think about. And not only does it do that, but it also adds a certain kindness to the parable, because generally when we read about it, we get either really biffed up with the servant that did 1, like, what the hell, everybody's doubling and you're like lazy, right? Or we get really mean with the master, saying, how mean are you? You're going to throw the guy in a place where there's whipping and gnashing of teeth? Neither are true. We become kinder when we get reincarnation because we understand that we are all 3 of them, and that we could be in that position too, and that in fact we are in that position, so we become a little bit more tolerant. And we also realize that the master is not treating him differently, it's treating him the way he thinks the master is going to treat him, which is really him treating himself that way, right? Because he says, I know that you're a hard man that reaps where you do not sow. Like, what kind of assumptions were that, right? He just gave you talents to begin with. So it's an interesting thing how reincarnation, in that sense, opens a door. I'm not saying that this is the correct interpretation of the parable, so it's up to you to interpret. I'm offering you a vision for you to see how once we look at the New Testament and we read it again with eyes of potentially considering reincarnation, the parables can have a different flavor to them. And so can have the parables, for instance, of the workers of the last hour, which is another interesting parable too. But so reincarnation was a concept that was at that time very ingrained there, and that we ought to continuously look at. And that's why we say that Spiritism is a progressive body of knowledge, because our goal as we learn Spiritism is to constantly look at things differently and learn different things. It's a science that deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits, as well as the relation to the corporeal world, as Allan Kardec described in a little book, What is Spiritism? Which means we have to be, when we're talking about Spiritism, very interested in the relationship between the physical world and the spiritual world. And that can only truly be understood through reincarnation, right? The constant progress. And we have to continuously, like a science, move on and think about things. So we need to revisit a lot of those concepts, a lot of those ideas that we had previously held, and see, where did I get that from? How did I get here? Why did I get here? Should I really hold these beliefs? Should I look at things differently? That's up to you. But what I want to say, and what I really mean to say here, is when we look at the New Testament, which is a fantastic book, a work of amazing status, because it offers so many great insights, whether they were truly written by the people who wrote them or not, whether they are really correct or not, we can make lemonade out of any lemons, right, that life throws us. There's beautiful messages in there that tells us about the existence of this great soul that came to enlighten us. But what I find fascinating is that oftentimes we miss. We're often, when we try to interpret things literally, we're often looking for the one explanation. This is the right way or the wrong way, because we can blame others, we write that kind of stuff. We feel better about ourselves. But it's important to remember that there are 4 Gospels in the New Testament: Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. So there are 4 different witnesses at different times who fundamentally write about sometimes the same thing, sometimes different things, but they have 4 different approaches. One is very Jewish-centric. One is very miracle-centric. Luke talks about the miracles. He was a doctor. He was interested in that kind of stuff. One is very Gentile and Roman-centric. And the other one, John, is very mystical in general. So we have 4 different approaches. And I find that divinity was at work here by giving us 4 different perspectives to look into. Not that we choose one, which we may, but to understand how they come together and how they don't come together. To expand our minds to the idea that we have to triangulate meaning. We have to go over there, read a little bit, and kind of think about it. We have to go over there, read a little bit, think about it. How does this two interact? Oh, there's a third one over there. And now I need to go over here, get the third one, bring it together, and make meaning of all that. Meaning to you, not to anybody else. So it's beautiful that the New Testament gives us that training grounds that we so often forget because we are so focused on the physical, literal piece of it. So I think that the really great message here is that it's your choice. Make the most of it. Go out and interpret it the way you want it to, that brings fulfillment and joy to you, that you can understand it. Because when we do that, we can really reevaluate history's bestseller. I don't know if you know this, but the bestseller in the world really is not J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter, although I'm a fan. It really is the Bible. It's the book most published out there. So let's reevaluate its message based on this triangulation that we were talking about, on these different things. That there are different things that we have to put effort into. When somebody tells you this is right, this is wrong, it makes it really easy for us because we're a little bit lazy sometimes. Oh, this is what's right, this is wrong. I don't have to kind of think and struggle with getting multiple things at once and making sense of it. But that's what we have to do. We have to struggle with those thoughts and different things together and make our own sense to it. And once we reevaluate that message that we're hearing, that Christian Judaic tradition that we keep hearing, and we say, hey, hold on a second. Where does that come from? I'm thinking a little bit different. I am sure and I'm convinced that you will see a whole different cosmology, a whole different way of looking at Christ, which I think Christ has been kidnapped by some theologies. You look at things differently. You say, wow, this is not exactly what I'm hearing other people tell me about this guy, or I'm not interpreting it exactly this way. Whatever works for you, make sure you investigate, you vet it, you hold it in your mind, and you really consider it. That you maybe can have a chance to go back to the New Testament, or whatever other work that you find interesting that points to aspirational things. Look at it again and say, I need to make sure I'm considering that perspective in my life. And ultimately, it has to come down to making better choices. Once we revise this and we have a new way of looking at the world, right, with reincarnation taken in, and now hopefully making it a little bit easier for us to reconcile that whole idea that we had of the Bible, the New Testament, with these new ideas that we're now having about reincarnation, see that they're not mutually exclusive, that they actually mesh, that they've been there all along, and that for historical reasons have kind of fallen apart a little bit, and they have been kind of shoved onto us by culture and by our own passive tendencies, because it's nobody else's fault but our own, because we took it in, right? That we can reevaluate the message and make better choices today, because if there is reincarnation, then today I can make a choice that will be better for me tomorrow. So let's do that. Let's make sure that we think about the long-term approach of things. Let's be kinder to each other today. Let's be more tolerant with each other's words and actions today, because we know that we will meet them again, if not in this lifetime, in the next. So if you know this, why wouldn't you be happier? Why wouldn't you be kinder and lighter about yourself? Don't be too hard on yourself. You will have time to work on yourself and improve yourself. Don't hold yourself back by saying, oh my God, I'm such a horrible person. I don't know how to do anything right. You have as many chances as you need to, so work on a positive. Let's move forward. Make better choices today so that we can have a better future tomorrow. And when we do that, and when we do look at things a little bit different and they change, I'm always reminded of a beautiful, another part of John that says, you know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And it will set you free for yourself. Whatever your truth ought to be, whatever it is that you arrive at, once you find something that's powerful, meaningful, and good, it will create that sense of joy of saying, wow, I'm really seeing things different. My life, it's a little bit lighter and a little bit easier. It won't necessarily solve all the world's problems or your life's problems, but hopefully by revisiting the concept of reincarnation and revisiting the idea of the New Testament and revisiting the idea of the Christ, who embody so many beautiful things and beautiful concepts that have been hijacked by different people trying to get their own agenda figured out, you too will feel light and better about knowing that you are a creature of God, you are loved by God, you will have as many chances as you take, you have many, many, many friends, both in the incarnate and discarnate planes of life, who are cheering for you, who are happy about you, and that you should never, ever feel lonely. Because even if you feel lonely now, there are those who have lived with you before on this side cheering you on. May we never forget that, and I hope that more and more we can have great conversations about what is it that we believe, why do we believe, in an accepting and kind manner that adds to the lives of all of those. Thank you very much. I'll take questions if you have them.
Thank you very much. I'm interested when I'm having a conversation with a religious person who has never had any exposure to reincarnation, and I start to just present the logic of it in my head. There's still a gap. Have you either published this, or is there anything you could recommend that we could read in common to have a better discussion?
It's funny to say that, because the idea of doing something like this was exactly because of that, right? Some people are exposed to the logic of reincarnation, and it makes sense. I like to say that reincarnation just makes sense for some people, right? But at the same time, we feel sometimes conflicted because we think we don't find it in our belief system. So we want to accept it, but we don't allow ourselves to accept it because we've been told that this is what it is, even when we have not read it, right? Which is funny, but it happens. So this was born out of the idea of saying, no, hold on a second. We're not choosing one or the other. We're not choosing reincarnation or the Bible. It's one big thing together. So there are great different sources that you can use to kind of read more about these things. Although I am also trying to eventually write this thing up a little bit, but there's some great things I can tell you. There is lots of books, and I can give you the exact titles later, but there's also a great professor, which I find, so in the making of the New Testament, which I think is a really fantastic historical piece for us to kind of soften up the idea that this is not like a mandate written thing. There's Professor Earthman from North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He does some fantastic books about how he came about in a very, he's Christian, but in a very scholarly way too, so you can kind of see the progression piece. And there are some other books by, her last name is Prophet too, on reincarnation in the Bible. Yeah. There's some stuff, I found some of it useful, I found some of it like, it didn't speak to me. But there are some sources out there that you can look into. But the best source really is just to kind of go through it and see. But hopefully those two people that have multiple books might help you.
And also, we're going to put a video on the SSNB website so they can go back and look again and study what you just taught us here today.
Great. And this presentation is also online, so there's also a link that you can go and you can click on your own things by your own thing. So if you want, let me know and I'll give you the address later. But you can kind of see that way. But it's a question of sharing and talking about it, because I find it a fascinating topic. We think that they are opposed or that we're fighting. We're not. We're really just looking at different things. But sometimes people are really shaken when you start talking about things that they feel is the core of who they are. So we have to be very careful in understanding of not trying to push anything, because once you start having somebody question their own belief system, it's a very powerful and dangerous and raw thing, right? It's not like we're not here to kind of debunk anybody or anything in that manner. It's just offer them, and if they want to look in that, they can do that.
Forgive me, I was not raised Christian, so this all these things are new for me. However, I'm thinking what you're trying to analyze and reinterpret the words. I believe in the Vatican, they have very smart scholars. How they are reading those lines, how they are interpreting to keep denying reincarnation. How are they reading those texts?
I wouldn't be able to tell you because I'm not them.
Yeah, but how they
don't think that they keep denying. I think it's just that, you have a way of doing things, and sometimes it's easy for us to get lost in those ways of doing things. You see, for instance, a great change nowadays with the new Pope. What a fantastic soul, right? What a beautiful, beautiful soul of going into a secular place. What I mean, not secular, sorry, is a millennial place, really, with so many thousands of years of culture, of traditions, which are really difficult. Traditions are really difficult things to change if you think about it. And such a courageous man to do things with such kindness. And I think the message of that is, whatever it is, do it with kindness. Even if you are looking into talking to different people or to, explaining things, it's not a combat between wills. We often feel that we have to kind of like figure out who's right because we want to know, because it makes us feel better and it's easier, right, wrong. But oftentimes it's somewhere in the middle. So what a beautiful thing that there is change in the world and people look at it different ways. And we must respect them for whatever view that they want to do, because, hey, that's their view. It doesn't affect us, right? It only affects us if we let it affect us. And by the way, there's no apologies needed whatsoever for not being raised Christian. Thank you for being here. And great that you were raised the way you were, with beautiful, no doubt message of itself. We shouldn't feel bad for not knowing this stuff. There's so much information out there in the world that we just don't know. But fortunately, with Spiritism, it teaches us that we too can grow in understanding, and we should understand a little bit more in the New Testament and other faiths around that, and we will find many of the same messages echoed. And if people did that, maybe we'll be a little bit more friendly towards each other. And that's ultimately our goal here.
Yeah, so I just want to comment on that, because I was raised Catholic, and I actually don't practice Catholicism anymore, but I completely appreciate the Catholic Church. And when I say that, every single Catholic that I know that is not where I am gets angry because I can't appreciate that. But in part of coming through what I had to come through to get to where I am today, and appreciate it and the richness of it, and the fact that they're evolving like all the rest of us, is I had to go back through the history of it. And I'm a little bit of I like to do history. So it's very interesting to me that a lot of that we're still holding on to today is what happened back in the Dark Ages, when that time in the church, they did manipulate the Gospels, which is probably a lot of what's showing up if you look at the historical records. But as we went through the Renaissance and the Reformation, and then you move through all these times in history, and you see how the church is changing, and you look at the last Pope and what he tried to achieve, and actually couldn't, so he stepped down. But then the new Pope has stepped up. And even in this last century, all that's happened with the different religions even coming and sitting at the same table to say, hey, we're recognizing that we're all the same. Once you understand the richness of that transition, then you can also see from our point of view as reincarnation that we are growing and saying, wait a second, we divided ourselves and now we're coming back together. So instead of looking at it through the lens of conviction, we should be looking at it through the lens of compassion, where, if I'm really upset by the Catholic Church, those fingers that are pointing, you need to take a look at those fingers that are pointing back at you and find out in yourself why it is you are so offended by what's going on in the church. What is missing from your intelligence, your knowledge, your information, and even in your spirit that's causing you to be so, they're just awful and we can't stand them.
Yes.
So that's just my point.
Yeah, this is a beautiful, thank you for the comment. It's a beautiful concept because I think it's one that's very human, it's very part of us, no matter our denominations, right? Whatever it may be, is exactly the idea that we oftentimes spend more time on the outside than on the inside. And what Spiritism, I think, does beautifully for us when we get the message and really kind of dive more into it, it's one of personal responsibility and free will. That is up to us to control that which we can control and work on the things that we can control. That everybody else's behavior is really difficult for us to affect. That we should not worry about what you say and what you do, and I should really maybe spend more time worrying about what I say, what I do. I can barely control myself. How could I control you, right? So it's an interesting perspective because it's a new shift in thinking that we have the opportunity to kind of learn from the good spirits that keep reminding us of the importance of our own inner transformation, of our own change. However, yes, it is very difficult to change. Change is hard. If it were easy, everybody would do it all the time. And let's be honest, we don't do it all the time unless we're forced to. That's why there's pain. Pain is kind of saying, hey, you need to do something different, but you are not willing to do it. So I'm going to remind you on a daily basis or whatever it may be that you need to do something different for your own good. If you have a broken leg, it means, hey, stop walking on it until it heals, right? It's nature's way of saying, there's something here that you need to pay attention to. So focusing on that inner transformation and their inner emphasis, I think is really at the core of what Spiritism wants us to work at. As a gentle reminder that we need to go back to the essence, right, to the beginning of Christianity. Oftentimes, we see in the parables in different parts, if you read the New Testament again, you probably see it, a couple of instances in which people want to trip Jesus. They want to catch him in little tricks so that he can say something that can arrest them. Right? So there's all these different things. You might remember that passage about to Caesar, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, right? People coming to him and say, hey, they say that we have to pay taxes, right, as they're serving Rome, and they really want to say him, no, we don't have to pay taxes because we are a sovereign people. But the moment that he says that, the Romans come and arrest him, right? So they're trying all kinds of like little smart things to say, hey, let's trip him. And he always kind of found a polite and kind way of saying, do this as opposed to don't do that. And I think that's the great upgrade that we get on the message, on the 2.0 version, right? With Moses, we had it was really important. We shouldn't complain about it, right? Because it was really helpful for us at that period of time. Kind of like the one-talent man. We needed the message because that's what we understood back in that time was don't do this. Don't kill. Don't, steal. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Whatever. All the little children thing. Like, don't put your hand in the sock. I'm glad to see that they're protected, by the way. Thank you very much for protecting the outlets for children everywhere. So, it was a lot of don'ts. A lot of don't do this because we're so still infant in our spiritual quest. With Christ, however, we got a major upgrade. Instead of don't kill, don't do this, Christ gives us the message of do. Love this, right? It begins in the beginning, right? In the beginning of his message, it's all about do unto others as you would like to have them do unto you. And even before he leaves, he upgrades the message again, gives us the 3.0 version, which really is, I don't know, from one passage says, now a new commandment I leave you, a new commandment I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. It's fundamentally different than love one another as you like to be loved, right? Very different. Now it's love one another, treat one another as I have treated you. The bar is higher. When you're in doubt as how to behave, think about how Jesus behaved. So it's again another commandment that's improvement. And what a great thing that we have now of Spiritism that makes it so hard sometimes is that we had these figures, right? We have Moses